In Joe Rogan Experience 2416 with Dan Farah, shocking claims emerge about alleged UFO recoveries, secret
Hopefully
programs,
it all comes out
and
and people
encounters
can
that were
legally talk
never
about it at
meant to
some
become
point,
public.
Can you talk about it without?
I know there's been multiple contact events, like straight up, like straight up contact events. One of them is revealed in the film actually, but there are more. There was this. Several of the people in my film talk about an event that happened at Hallerman Air Force Base where two non-human crafts approached the base, one landed, beings walked out and interacted with Air Force officials and CIA officials. And a couple people go on the record talking about that in the film. But there have been other events, I've been told.
How are those beings described?
They were described as tall, slender, humanoid. And the another thing that I heard that gave me chills was that someone involved with a recovery interacted with a non-human being that was dying and heard thoughts in his head that said, "You humans don't know your full potential." And that was said to me by a very senior, older guy from the intelligence community. And I thought that was pretty incredible. Also, just the extent to which the legacy program is real. This isn't like 50 guys, sitting in a quiet, dark room. You're talking about a massive program with thousands of people going to work every day and dealing with this. And to me, that is mind-blowing, Yeah. The guy next to you at the pizza place, on a Saturday night might be working on this during the day,
Right.
The guy who, the other father at your kid's Little League game.
Yeah.
This is what he deals with, right? The fact that is a thing, and we had a similar dynamic for the Manhattan Project. There were all these people working on it, and they kept it secret, right? And their neighbors and friends didn't know. But this is that on steroids. So, after the Manhattan Project, which was had a budget in the billions, this situation arose, and it had to be even more secret than the Manhattan Project, because the Manhattan Project, we found out in hindsight, leaked, right? There were moles.
Right.
So we needed to make this even more secret and give it more money and more resources and more, counter intel. And
more threats.
Which is counter intel, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, threats if you reveal those secrets. But it's like the more this stuff gets discussed, the more I go back to what Lazar said. Because what Lazar is describing from the 1980s is exactly what these people are saying now. They've had these things. They've been trying to figure them out. They've been working on them. At least in the 1980s, they hadn't totally cracked it yet. But they did know how to operate them, and that they would do these tests. But everything was so compartmentalized. He said he wasn't allowed to talk to the metallurgist. There was different people that were assigned to it.
Yeah.
What they were assigned to do was to try to figure out how the propulsion system worked.
Yeah.
And then there was other people that were assigned to try to figure out how the metallurgy was formed. Because whatever it was seemed like it was 3D printed. It didn't have any seams.
Yeah.
And when he talks about it, it sounds exactly like what people are talking about today, which is really bananas.
Yeah.
Because this is late 1980s, and he's the first guy to crack through with this stuff.
Yeah. Everything is so, in that secret program, everything is so siloed out where you could have one team of defense contractors who are working on one thing. They're not even told it's from an alien spacecraft. They're just told, here's the thing. It might be Russia. It might be China. Tell us how it works.
Right.
They're just kept in a little bubble. And one of the issues now is that everything's become so overclassified and so siloed that it's actually hurting progress. And that's a lot of the scientists in my film are voicing that. And one of the other things I learned recently that isn't in the film, Jay Stratton, who ran the UAP task force, he told me that during that time, he had started a talk with one of the senior scientists at Lockheed, who was frustrated by how overclassified everything was. It even made it hard for the defense contractors to get the right manpower and brains on it, because not everyone can be cleared to do the work, right? There's all these red tape hurdles to progress, right? And so they had made a plan to move one of the crafts that had been recovered that was in Lockheed's possession into the possession of the UAP task force. And then the task force was going to be able to put more brain power towards it. And then the head of science and technology at the CIA shut it down in the middle of the transfer. They had actually secured a hangar on a military base and prepped it to be a classified hangar that would hold this craft, and they were stopped. So the issue of overclassification.
Did they know what happened after that?
When we entered the space race, Kennedy gave that big famous speech, right? He was like, we're going to lead in space. Technology, like, space technology, like nuclear technology, has no conscience of its own. It's up to man to use it for good or bad, and we're going to make sure it's used for the betterment of all mankind, and we're going to lead the way. That was his whole rallying speech, right? And it made the whole scientific community be like, we're going to help the U.S. win, like, rah, 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 right? I think that's needed in this race. Like, we need all the support of the scientific community, of academia, the kids coming out of MIT. We need them putting their brain power towards this. And I think the White House knows that. And it's also the greatest, that's the greatest TV moment a leader could have in the history of humanity. Step into the microphone.
Do you think Elon knows?
Look, I've seen him obviously talk to you about it. I think he knows a lot.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think you get the contracts and the clearances you need to operate in space without some horse trading.
Yeah, when I went to SpaceX, I'm like, motherfucker, you know everything. There's no way you're launching these fucking things into space without them keying you in on exactly what's going on. He's just sly about it.
Well,
He goes, well, if they are aliens, they're certainly all subtle. That's what he says. Like,
well,
are they really? I don't know, man.
I think it's impossible to operate in space like he does and not be aware of everything. And also at the level he operates clearance-wise. I held a secret screening at the National Space Symposium earlier this year, which is the Super Bowl of the space industry. It's like 60 people, heavy hitters from the space industry. We didn't promote it or publicize it at all, but there were a dozen guys from SpaceX there, and they all seem very aware of everything revealed in the film.
Yeah.
In Joe Rogan Experience number 1883, Ryan Graves describes UFOs appearing daily over the ocean, and no one could explain them.
Please tell people your credentials, what your background is.
Sure. So, my name is Ryan Graves. I have an engineering degree, mechanical and aerospace engineering. I promptly left doing that to go fly F-18s for the Navy as soon as I graduated college. Did that for about a decade, both operationally in combat as well as in an instructor role, teaching the new students. And, we did witness something while we were flying in our jets, but, we were doing it we witnessed it in the context of our just everyday flying in our missions.
And what year was it that you witnessed this?
So we started seeing these in 2014 was the earliest that I know. 2013, late 2013, early 2014.
And could you describe what was the very first experience?
Yeah, so for me personally, the experience was simply just flying out to the area like I would any other day. And instead of seeing an empty airspace with just my wing person or another squadron doing something in a different block, there were all of a sudden a lot of different radar contacts, which is immediately a problem because, we could be hitting one of those or someone working in our area. And this was happening because we upgraded our radar the best we could tell. We were in a earlier radar called the APG-73, and we had come back from deployment. We entered a maintenance phase, it's called. We kind of do a little bit less flying, upgrade the jets if we need to, do any long-lasting maintenance, and we upgraded to the APG-79, which was a much better radar.
And what is the difference in the capabilities of the upgraded radar system versus the original system?
Mm-hmm. So, kind of practically speaking, it's like going from an analog TV essentially to like an OLED. It's, a digital modern tool compared to more of like an analog classical radar that has more limited range and has less ability to track multiple targets and things of that nature. So just generally speaking, we would expect to see, more objects if there were any out there or smaller objects, but there shouldn't have been any objects out there.
And so how far offshore are you when this is all going down?
Our working areas start about 10 miles off the coast, and then it goes out, 100 or 250 miles or so, though we don't usually use those far eastern areas. But we would only see them over the water. So they would really only be in our working areas, maybe slightly, in between the working areas and land, but never over the land. Sometimes over the bays that are in the area that are quite large, but never just kind of zooming west over land or anything like that.
And is this restricted airspace?
It's not. So that's a tricky question. For us operating in a military operating area, it is not restricted in the sense that you have to be there's only one person allowed in there. You could have these little Cessnas kind of bumbling in there, but they would get called out pretty quick, both from the kind of air traffic control agency that's working out there, as well as the F-18s and the other aircraft that may be working out there. But in a broader sense, when we look at it in relation to our air defense identification zone, which is essentially a band of airspace that surrounds our entire country, if your flight path originates out over the water outside of that ADIZ and you proceed into that ADIZ, into our controlled airspace, then you do have to essentially have permission to enter that airspace. It's not a restricted airspace like a traditional bombing range, but it is protected airspace. It's our coastal air.
So the first time you see these things, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the first time really was, well, what is this, right? It's not a UFO or something mysterious at this point. It's at what we're thinking at this point we see on the radar is just, well, our radar is broken, right? These perhaps don't represent physical objects yet because we hadn't, visually seen these or seen them on our camera yet. And so, we kind of like, hey, what's going on here? Is anyone else seeing this kind of thing? But not really like investigating it, right? It's just kind of like, all right, there was stuff out there, but maybe next time we'll take a look. But the way our systems work, when we have all these contacts on our radar, and if we kind of just select one out with our little cursor there, all our sensors go to it. Our FLIR goes to it, which is our camera system. All our weapons, they have like their own little eyes in some sense, and they all look in that direction. And so eventually, someone had one of these selected and flew close enough so that as they look at their FLIR system, their camera, they could see something that was at the spot represented on the radar, right? So there was something there.
So they were seeing it visually with their own eyes?
Not at this point, just on the FLIR system.
The FLIR system.
And so it's a regular camera and also an infrared camera. And so typically we'll roll around in infrared just because it returns a better image, typically. So yeah, it didn't look like an object they were seeing on the FLIR. It just looked like a source of IR energy in a sense, almost as if someone was shining a flashlight. But something had to be there to be reflecting that energy or creating it. So at this point, to answer your question, now we're like, okay, this isn't just an error in our radar. This is perhaps, we're thinking this is real. We have to really respect this as like a safety hazard now. Even if it's just a small, however small ribbon of tinfoil, right? Like that suck down the engine can still take out an aircraft, right? So we have to be very respectful of that.
Like a Mylar balloon type thing?
Potentially, right? Yeah.
But how fast are these things going?
So sometimes stationary, right? Sometimes they would be going around 0.6 to 0.8 Mach, which is at altitude about, 240 to maybe 330 knots, around there.
So somewhere in the range of an airplane.
Yeah, a fighter aircraft would be kind of flying around at those airspeeds, except sometimes they would be perfectly stationary as well.
Right. So it's not exhibiting any sort of patterns that you've recognized in the past.
No, they have actually. So,
although with the stationary, no, right?
Correct. With the stationary, no. With the meandering kind of flight path, no. But I would also see them essentially fly what we call a racetrack pattern. And essentially what that means is they fly in a straight path, and then they do like a 180-degree turn in a certain direction. Then they fly a straight path, then turn again. So that's what we call a racetrack pattern as opposed to a circular holding pattern. We did witness racetrack patterns. In fact, I think there's been some cases off the West Coast just the past couple of weeks where people have also been observing objects flying in racetrack patterns high at altitude with lights. So I do recognize that behavior, but I don't necessarily think that means we have to attribute it to normal behavior necessarily. That type of flight path is important because it's a very efficient way to fly, right? If you have to maintain the position in a certain area, you want to minimize how much you're turning. Because anytime you're turning in an aircraft, you're using more energy than if you were just flying straight and level. And so by having that racetrack pattern, it's an efficient way of holding in a position by maximizing straight and level time and minimizing your turn time.
And how long would these things stay up there for?
So from our experience, and again, we weren't studying these, but they were always out there. They were
always
out there when we took off, we'd see them, and then we go to land, they would still be out there.
Like every day?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day.
So you guys go from not having any idea that these things are out there to an upgraded radar system to seeing them every day.
Yep.
What is the thought? Like, how are you feeling when these, like, is there an evolution of the thought pattern of how you're addressing these things and thinking about them? Initially, you're thinking they're errors. When do you start getting a thought that, like, what the fuck is this thing?
Yeah. So that happened when we visually saw one. And the first time we visually saw one, the object was directly at what we call the entry point of the area. So, that box that I told you about in the sky that starts 10 miles off the coast, there's a particular GPS, location and altitude where incoming traffic will fly in, and outbound traffic will fly in the exact same spot, but will fly out 1,000 feet lower. There were 2 aircraft from my squadron, VFA 11, and they flew, took off as a flight of 2. That means they're essentially flying in a formation like this. And as they hit the area, one of these objects went right between the aircraft. The lead air crew saw the object. The Dash 2 aircraft crew did not, which is not surprising because they're usually, you're very focused on flying formation. You're just staring right at that aircraft. The lead really has actual leeway to look around. So he saw it, and, he immediately came back. I have to assume he didn't have it on his radar because he wouldn't have flown through this object at the entrance point. He turned around, flew back, landed, and I was in the ready room when he come back, and he had all his gear on, which typically is not a good thing because you want to get that stuff off as fast as possible. So usually means there's a problem of some nature, and he was just sitting there saying, "Hey, I almost hit one of those damn things." And we all knew what he was referring to, even though we didn't necessarily have a name for it, just because we were seeing these so much. And he described it. He described it just as a black or dark gray cube, and that cube was inside of a clear or translucent sphere. And essentially, the apex or the corners of that cube, best he could tell, were touching that inside of that sphere.
And that description mirrors many of the descriptions that people have had of these, whatever you want to call them. Whether they're calling them UAPs now for some strange reason. UFOs is I don't know, does it have a dirty connotation to it? And is it tainted because of so many crazy people talk about UFOs? Is that what it is?
It does come with a lot of assumptions baked in.
It baked in. So that's something, but whatever it is, that is a design that people have reported seeing before. That this translucent sphere and this cube, can you see through the cube?
Not to my understanding, no.
So it's some sort of solid black cube that's inside this translucent sphere, and it's just floating around and flying around the sky.
So, that's a good point. Is it floating around? Is it flying around? It's doing both, which is strange, right? Because you could think of that description and go, okay, that's kind of some kind of weird balloon maybe with stuff in it. And that's certainly, one way. If you just view that angle of it, then it seems explainable. But when that, the balloon-like object starts cruising down at, 0.8 Mach, that nullifies that particular idea. And you'll see that a lot where it's not just like that one picture, that one behavior. It's really, you kind of have to zoom out a bit and look at everything in relation to each other and say, okay, why is this weird? Okay, it was hanging out in a racetrack pattern. That's not exotic. But when you learned it was doing it for, perhaps 13 hours.
13 hours?
Perhaps they were out there all the time, So, I land and I go back. And we weren't on a intel mission to analyze these, right? We're going to do our training. It's very expensive, $30K an hour to fly these things, right? So really the only time we can put energy into looking at these things is when we're kind of transiting back and forth or waiting for a fight to start. And so, it's never like a dedicated analysis.
In JRE number 2428, Michael P. Masters explores a theory that could completely change how we see UFOs.
We're so vulnerable. And that's one of the weirder things. So first we should get into what you do, because you have a very interesting theory. Tell everybody what your background is, first of all.
Yeah, all right. That does seem like a good place to start. My background is in anthropology, biological anthropology. My research mostly focuses on evolutionary anatomy, biomedicine. I've done some archaeology, various places around the world, in Montana. But the reason I'm here, I assume, because according to my friend Matt, We were butchering a mule deer, I think I shot. And I was like, yeah, I got to go to this conference. And I was like, do you want to know what it's about? He's like, nobody gives a shit about what you do other than UFOs, man. I was like, damn it, he's right. Like, I did actually used to do a lot of what I thought was cool stuff. But no, the main thing is that I've become known for advocating for this idea that UFOs and the aliens are actually our time-traveling future human descendants. I wouldn't even say as opposed to extraterrestrials, because I do think that's a component too. I oftentimes get pigeonholed. People are like, oh, you just think they're all time travelers. I don't. I actually say this all the time, but it doesn't matter. I do think there's a lot going on. But my background and the reason I approach this question this way is because there's a lot of characteristics of these aliens that look so hominin. They look just like us. And specifically what we'd expect to see in our hominin future if the same evolutionary trends continue into the future. So I kind of just tie those things together. And even the saucer-shaped craft seemingly are time machines themselves. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version.
Well, it's a theory that a lot of people have independently sort of come to, right?
Yeah, especially recently.
And the concept of, well, if you just think about ancient man. I was watching this documentary on Neanderthals last night about this one intact Neanderthal skeleton that they found that it had sort of been, he had died in a cave, and there's stalagmites. Is stalactites or mites? How do you say it?
Tights are up, mites are down.
So he was essentially mineralized.
Mm-hmm.
There was stuff all over the body, and it took a long time for them to break this body.
I think I saw that. Was that on Netflix?
No, I was watching it on YouTube. Maybe originally it was on Netflix. But it was just documenting how strange this body was that they had found. But it was immensely strong, like much stronger than us. One of the interesting things was that their visual cortex, the part of the brain that would process imagery, was larger than ours, 10 to 20% larger.
Yeah.
And that so these things probably had better eyesight than us, perhaps even were able to see at night, and that this was a bigger, stronger version of a human being, like much more durable than what we are, modern 2025 Homo sapiens.
Yep.
If you just look, that's it. So that's one of them.
Cool.
Neither human nor Neanderthal.
Oh, really?
This is published in
Is this the
August.
same? This might not be the same one. This is maybe a different one. That's a weird one because what's that fucking thing on its head?
That's what it says. It's a stalactite growing out of it or something.
Wow. In a weird form. Weird.
Yeah, it's like a unicorn.
Yeah, like a crest.
They do have a sagittal ridge.
Yes.
Homo erectus had one. There's an offshoot in our hominid lineage called the Paranthropus, or robust Australopithecines, and they had a full-on like gorilla style sagittal ridge. Yeah, because they were vegetarians, so they just chewed all day.
Right, so they had massive muscles to chew.
Yeah, their whole face is huge.
Wow.
Neanderthals kind of, they were just big. It's
Yeah.
just a robusticity thing, but there is evidence from Shanidar Cave in Iraq where they were using their teeth as tools. We think they were like tanning hides. They were holding the hide in their mouth and then like scraping all the nasty bits off.
Oh.
And you can see that in the tooth wear. So yeah, they were pretty badass. They were the first. I don't know. I think this is cool, but a lot of people think I'm a nerd too. They were the first to use the flake. Like for 2.8 million years, we just hit a piece of rock and like, oh, this is a cool tool. But then they figured out that if you hit the rock in just the right way, the piece that falls off makes an even better tool. It took us like 2.5. Yeah,
this.
Exactly.
You make an arrowhead.
And from that point on, like I got to work at a place called Chez Pinot-Jonzac in southern France.
Public thing that's in the zeitgeist, like alien abduction, whether it's Whitley Strieber from Communion or the John Mack books, the guy from Harvard that wrote what was it, Abduction?
Passport to the Cosmos and Abduction. Yeah. Two great books.
Great books. But these are all books about encounters, close encounters of the third kind with some sort of a being from another place. Whatever it is, it's just not a human being, and it seems to be technologically at least superior to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be one thing they all seem to share is they seem to be able to communicate telekinetically or telepathically.
Yeah. Yeah, and they aren't human, but they are very human too. So for instance, like that's one of the main reasons I started exploring this. I was actually kind of put into this when I was 8 or 9 years old, sort of activated in a way and put on this path by a weird thing that happened to me when I
What
was a
happened
kid.
to you?
Well, so I talk about it in my first 2 books, Identified Flying Objects and the Extraterrestrial Model, where I learned about a close encounter that my dad had. He was a veterinarian in Northeast Ohio where I grew up. And he was out one night on a call with another guy. So there's 2 people. As far as Jalen Hynek's reliability scale, has more reliability because there's multiple witnesses. It's also strange on his scale because they crested the hill. There's a bright light. This is an Amish country. There's no lights in Amish country.